Welcome back to part 2 of the Shadow the Hedgehog focus HeroesPowerPlant tutorials. Today we're going to go over what a layout is, how we can make a custom layout, how we can customize the spawn location, and then changing out objects that are not normally in the stage. A layout is just the object map that is all the different files in the level, so enemies, rings, dash ramps, you name it, all that is controlled by the layout. Shadow the Hedgehog loads 4 different layout files by default per stage. Not all stages use them, so bosses, for example, only use CMN and DS1, but if you go ahead and create those HRD and NRM files, they will be loaded for the respective modes. I'm going to go ahead and open up Westopolis in the extracted game folder and show you what I'm talking about. So here you can see the CMN, so this is the common file. Here's NRM, that's the normal one. HRD is for expert mode, and then DS1 is for the destructibles. If I go pick a boss folder, like Black Bull for example, you'll see there's a DS1 and a CMN, but there's no NRM or HRD. If you would add them here, the game would load them whenever you're picking this respective mode. Go ahead and launch HeroesPowerPlant and select a stage. I'm going to do Westopolis. Whenever you pick a level, by default, we automatically load in the layout files. You can see it under Editors, Layout Editors right here, or you can just press F5 and all of them will pop open. So as we discussed, this is the expert layout, so I'm going to go and fly to the helicopter, which I know is only an expert here. And I can just say stop drawing if I want to hide the expert stuff, or I can close it entirely to get rid of it in the layout editors. Worth noting that the destructible file, that's the DS1, generally has all this lighting file stuff here, so this white here, if I click it, it's in the DS1, it's all the local lighting. I'm not really interested in seeing this, but I do want to see like the destructibles here, so I'm going to instead say stop drawing the triggers, that way I don't accidentally click that when trying to move objects, and I can still see the environment objects in the stage. Close this one out. It doesn't actually close it unless you say file close, it just hides the window. I'm going to pick an enemy here. There's a lot of attributes, most of them are editable in HeroesPowerPlant. Worth noting that some of these fields may or may not be used by the objects. That's because in Shadow everything is based on an inheritance hierarchy, so all enemies inherit from like enemy base, then there's flying base, then there's sonic base. There's all this stuff where some fields may or may not be used, so you're gonna have to experiment. I'm gonna have a future tutorial which goes more over these fields, like what the link IDs are, how we can affect things, but the most important thing to note here is you can move enemies around with the gizmos here, and just fly them around the stage, or you can edit them directly. So if I want to move them around, I can click these buttons or set a field, so boom, way far away. A very convenient feature is this View Here button, and this will warp your view to whichever object you have selected. So if I select something that I don't know what I'm picking, I can say View Here, boom, shows me exactly where this object is. Super useful. If I want to move an object, but I don't want to drag it all the way over there or figure out where the coordinates are, I can just select this object, go wherever I want to put it in the stage. Let's say I want it near this bus, and I can just say cam drop, it'll place it right in front of where you're looking. And if I want to adjust the rotation, we don't have gizmos for that yet. Render distance, pretty self-explanatory. The lower it is, the closer you have to be before the object loads in, and this is relative to Shadow's camera, so just keep that in mind. Last thing is floor drop. Doesn't really make sense for a beetle, but say these gun soldiers here, I'm going to pick one, go fly somewhere else on the stage. Say I want to put him here, but oh no, he's in the air. I don't want to have to wiggle waggle him to figure out exactly where the collision is. Instead you can just say floor drop, and that'll snap to the nearest collision floor, which again, if you press X you can see the collision. So just be aware, sometimes you might be like, hey, I want him to be on this object and use floor drop. It won't work because it's relative to the collision, the stage, not the different destructibles. Before we continue on, let's go ahead and jump to this exercise here. So we're going to customize where we spawn in the stage. Now to do that actually has nothing to do with HeroesPowerPlant. It's entirely based on this Nukkoro2.ini file in the root of your extracted game directory. This is also where you can set ranks, mission rules. You can't customize the mission themselves, but you can change destroy 35 gun soldiers to 45 or 10. Here it is. And I recommend using something like Notepad++ or VS Code because there's some Japanese characters that won't display correctly in Notepad. City 1 is Westopolis, and if you don't want to figure these out, if you go to the Shadow the Hedgehog Reloaded repo, we already have a comment for each different stage. This is the coordinates where you're spawning, this is the player number, then it's X, Y, Z, and then rotation X, Y, Z. So if you wanted to add a player 2 spawn, you need to do the same thing, but add this as a 1. Event position, they have fixed rotation, so you can't control that, but you can control where the camera is relative to Shadow. So Shadow is going to be moved to wherever you put this. And here are the ranks themselves, going by A, B, C, D. Here's the mission counts that I mentioned, so this is like the gun soldiers, I think, and this one is the black arms. So we can just change this to 10 and 15. Let's go ahead and put Shadow past this little intro point. I'm going to fly down here. And I want Shadow to spawn right around this area, let's say. So down at the bottom left corner, you can see the position here. But if you are too lazy to copy it, there's a button where if you click this, this will appear. You can say copy position for Nukkoro2.inf. This will overwrite whatever on your clipboard. Go back to that Nukkoro2.inf. and you want to replace this line that says player, and paste, and boom, there we go. Worth noting, that feature doesn't account for rotations yet, so you may need to tweak these values yourself. Alright, so we loaded in and immediately spawned right here. Let's go ahead and add a android in Lessopolis. Do that. We could, I'm going to pick the common layout file here, we could say add, and then find shadow android in this list here. However, I prefer to go and find that object existing in the stage already. So if I say layout editor, new object, and I'm going to go pick lava shelter, because I know that stage has shadow androids. I believe lava shelter is 0602, probably in the common. Scroll down here, and I'm already seeing some shadow androids. If you're having trouble finding it, you can just press S, and this will go through alphabetically. You could also go edit sort, and probably do alphabetically or by ID, and then it'll be much easier because you can just say, here's the S section, there it is, shadow androids. I'm going to pick one that has an appear type of stand. Offset in shadow just means not until you're near it, it won't spawn in, and then that's how high it'll be away from shadow, how far, and the depth. So I'm going to pick one that has stand, just to make it easier. There we go. And I'm going to say copy on the bottom left here. Then I can go to any different layout editor and paste, and it'll successfully paste the file here. Now if I would say view here, it's going to be in the middle of nowhere, because that's the coordinates for lava shelter. I'm going to go press R, or it might be easier just to warp to another object in the stage. Let's go ahead and add the shadow android right in this general area. So I'm going to reselect shadow android and then say cam drop and then floor drop. Move him back a little bit, try floor drop again. There we go. So he was colliding with something. I'm going to flip his rotation around. Let's say -90. There we go. So now he should be facing shadow once you get into this general area. There's a render distance of 7. Go ahead and save this file and run it and try to see this character in game. You will need to completely restart the game whenever you're adding a new file. If you're just editing things, like changing this attribute out, you can save and just reload the stage. But if you're adding new data, that changes the file size and that'll mess with the game, so it won't work properly unless you restart completely. We should also see the mission counts. Forgot to check that earlier. Yep, there we go. Oh no, our shadow android isn't here. What went wrong? Well, what went wrong is there's a file here called SETIDBIN, and that controls what objects are allowed in the stage. If the objects aren't set in there, sometimes it'll throw an exception, or sometimes it just chooses not to load in the enemy or the object. To fix that, we need to go to Editors, SetID Table Editor, choose File, Open, Shadow SetIDBin. And we need to go and scroll all the way down to the SetIDBin file here. Then you need to select the object that you are looking to add to the stage. So it's shadow android. Let's say I don't know what the number is, so I can go back in here, and up at the top you'll see 007A. So now let's go to that editor. So now I know it's under 007A. It's still organized a little weird. That's just how it is. Let's see. Here we go, 007A, shadow android. And in here you can see which stages they're authorized to be loaded in. So we need to add it to Lessopolis. Check, and then you need to save. And once again, you have to reload the game. Now, as you can probably tell, it's quite annoying to have to sit through this sequence every single time. So there's a code called Quick Boot where you can just press X, kind of like Reloaded, and that'll jump straight to select mode. I will add that in the description. And there we go. There's our shadow android with their lovely aim as usual. Come on, you can do it. You're so close. I think this tutorial is already long enough as it is. Next time we're going to go over what these are. I'm working on a tool right now to make adding different objects from other stages easier, so I'll follow up with a video next time.